looking at her right now. I can't see anything. There's nothing broken. She's bleeding. Ellie!
Welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Gisela K, and today what we're going to be doing is looking at a members-only replay where I did a document deep dive. So I'm bringing you all the highlights. If you want to see the full episode, that is linked below for you. So we're just going to get right into it. So don't worry, if you don't know much about this case, it's okay, because we will go through this document and then you should get caught up. So this binder, the docket made for us based on lots of documents in the Ellen Greenberg case. And so if you want to buy him a coffee, it's buymeacoffee.com/the docket. So if we look here, Joshua M. Greenberg and Sandra Greenberg, that's Ellen Greenberg's parents, right? As the administrators of the estate of Ellen R. Greenberg, deceased. And they've got everything there. So they're fighting for justice for Ellen Greenberg, all right? This action seeks mandamus, or alternatively declaratory relief, to change the manner of death on the certificate of death of Ellen R. Greenberg, deceased, from suicide to could not be determined. The category for manner of death defendants were at a minimum required to check under the circumstances. Don't you think it's so sad that all they're trying to do is change, the manner of death from suicide just to undetermined? That's all they're asking for at this point. I mean, homicide and a full-blown investigation, somebody in cuffs would be great, but her parents are just fighting for could not be determined. Just a reminder that Ellen Greenberg's parents, they do have a petition that you can sign. I'll put everything in the description box afterwards as well. It's also on my original video of this case. They do need our help. So they say this action is compelled because the defendants have declined to voluntarily perform this non-discretionary act. So yes, so number 2, Ellen R. Greenberg died on the 26th of January 2011 from multiple stab wounds varying in depth to the back of her head and neck, as well as to her chest and abdomen. The medical evidence indicates that not all of these wounds could have possibly been self-inflicted. Moreover, this evidence strongly establishes a knife other than the one recovered at the scene was used to inflict many of Ellen's 20 separate stab wounds. Other information, some just recently obtained, firmly draws into doubt, if not forcefully rebuts, a finding of suicide. So 3, they say, unsurprisingly, after thorough autopsy and toxicology examinations, defendants initially ruled Ellen Greenberg's death was a homicide. Later, and only after the Philadelphia Police Department had begun to publicly contradict the defendant's medical findings, the defendants inexplicably changed the manner of her death from homicide to suicide without explanation and without any compelling reasons or sufficient medical support for this reversal. However, as a matter of law, the defendants had no discretion to change the manner of Ellen's death from homicide to suicide. Instead, under the circumstances here, they were at a minimum required to conclude and record the manner of Ellen's death could not be determined. At a minimum. Their selection of suicide further represents an arbitrary and capricious act. The negative consequences of the defendant's misconduct is far-reaching, not only impacting Ellen's estate, but her family members, the vital statistics registration system in the Commonwealth and the United States, and the basic goals of our system of criminal justice and accountability. The parties: 6 plaintiffs, Joshua M. Greenberg, DMD, and Sandra Greenberg, husband and wife, are adult individuals and citizens of Pennsylvania, and they're residing at, and are the parents of Ellen R. Greenberg, deceased. Letters testamentary have been issued to Joshua M. Greenberg and Sandra Greenberg by the Philadelphia County Court of Common Pleas, Orphans Court Division, for the administration of the estate of Ellen R. Greenberg. Defendant Marlon Osborne, MD, Dr. Osborne, is at all times relevant here too. A physician specializing in the field of pathology, and in 2011 was duly licensed to practice medicine in Pennsylvania and was employed as a pathologist at the Philadelphia County Medical Examiner's Office. Dr. Osborne presently maintains a business, at that address. Defendant Philadelphia County Medical's Office, MEO, through its affiliated pathologist, has responsibility for issuing death certificates after determining the cause and manner of death to the extent either or both can be compellingly ascertained for sudden, unexpected, and unnatural deaths occurring within the boundaries of Philadelphia County. The MEO, through its affiliated pathologist, is charged with conducting an investigation into the cause and manner of death in such circumstances, including, if necessary, performing an autopsy. Ultimately, the MEO pathologist is solely responsible for determining both the cause and manner of death on the Commonwealth certification of death in every case that the MEO handles. When we looked at the case just on March 6th, I did a full recap there. They're still fighting for that, and they're still waiting to hear from the DA, from what I understood. There was indication, I believe last year, October, that they were going to, but I really hope that they will get somewhere. So we're looking at the Ellen Greenberg case, a case from January 2011, and now we are looking at this document, and we're looking at the section of facts. In January 2011, Ellen Greenberg was 27 years old, living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a popular elementary school teacher employed at the Juanita Park Academy, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and engaged to be married that upcoming August 2011. On January 26, 2011, a Wednesday, Juanita Park Academy closed early due to heavy snow falling throughout the Philadelphia region. Ellen Greenberg headed home from work, making sure to top off her gas tank on the way to her nearby apartment in the Manayunk neighborhood of Philadelphia. Now, even that, why on earth, if somebody was going to take their own life, would they be like, you know what, let me just fill up my gas tank? Just fill that up first and then make fruit salad and then randomly stab yourself 20 times? It makes no sense. So, once home, as the blizzard outside continued throughout the afternoon and into the evening, Ellen Greenberg relaxed and began cutting fruit for a salad she would never get a chance to eat. Oh man, that sounds very sad. Around dinner time on January 26, 2011, Ellen Greenberg was found dead on her kitchen floor, propped with her head slumped against a cabinet. There was a 10-inch long serrated knife embedded deep in her chest, the last of her 20 stab wounds. Okay, so trigger warning, this content is for adults only. And of course, this is about, I was just going to say just like that, it's a murder case, but they're calling it suicide. The death of Ellen Greenberg. I won't read all the graphic autopsy details and things. That document is available, this one, on Patreon if you do want to read through it yourself. We're just going to go over the facts and then some of the letters that were written as well. So they said 10 of these had been inflicted to the back of her neck and head, including 2 penetrating deep into her brain. At the scene on January 26, 2011, investigators found, along with the half-made fruit salad, blood covering Ellen Greenberg's body, pulled on the floor and present on the surrounding cabinets. The knife block, where the knife in Ellen Greenberg's chest was normally kept, was upended, its contents having skittered with some force across the counter and into the sink. Although most of the police officers who arrived on the scene that night believed immediately that Ellen Greenberg had been murdered, the lead on-scene homicide detective inexplicably ruled the manner of death a suicide. As a result, crime scene protocols and other precautions typically implemented by the police in cases where homicide is suspected were not observed at the apartment. So remember, her fiancé had called a very powerful political dude in the area, his uncle and his cousin, which is that uncle's son. And they were on the scene before the cops even arrived. So I don't know if that had an influence over the police or what. I'm not too sure. Stefan says, so the uncle decided it was suicide. It seems so. They say Ellen Greenberg's body eventually was transported from her apartment to the MEO's offices in order to conduct an autopsy to ascertain the medical cause and manner of her death. The next day, January 27, 2011, at the MEO facility in West Philadelphia, Dr. Osborne performed the requisite autopsy on Ellen Greenberg's body. The medical autopsy revealed that Ellen Greenberg had been stabbed 8 separate times in her chest, with the depth of each slash varying from 0.2 centimeters to 10 centimeters. The autopsy further revealed a 6 centimeter deep puncture in Ellen's abdomen, a 6.5 centimeter long gash across her scalp, and 10 individual stab wounds to her neck, ranging in depth from 0.2 centimeters to 7 centimeters. Her cranial cavity had been penetrated by one of her neck wounds, severing the cranial nerves and brain. Medically, this deep laceration alone would have led Ellen to experience severe pain, cranial nerve dysfunction, and traumatic brain signs and symptoms, including numbness, tingling, impaired or loss of consciousness. A true and correct copy of the report and findings by the Office of Medical Examiner is attached here too and incorporated here as Exhibit A. And we will look at that. In addition to the fatal injuries Ellen endured from repeated stabbings, the autopsy by Dr. Osborne alarmingly revealed numerous unexplained bruises covering Ellen's body in various stages of resolution. So they say noticeable bruises were found at her upper and lower extremities, and similar bruises were observed on her right upper arm, right forearm, right lower abdomen, right thigh, and above her right knee. Medically, the pattern, severity, and number of these bruises suggest repeated physical altercations. Confronted with these potent and horrific medical findings, Dr. Osborne concluded after completing the autopsy on January 27, 2011, that the manner and cause of Ellen Greenberg's death was homicide due to multiple stab wounds, repudiating the prior non-medical conclusion that her death was a suicide. Dr. Osborne formally memorialized his medical opinion regarding Ellen Greenberg's death in a certification of death, which Dr. Osborne signed on January 27, 2011. I'm glad they got a copy of that, because imagine if that was destroyed, right? A true and correct copy of the certification of death dated January 27, 2011 is attached here too and incorporated herein as Exhibit B. External non-medical pressure to change the manner of death, okay? Dr. Osborne's medical decisions on the cause and manner of Ellen Greenberg's death on January 27, 2011 were final, binding, and not subject to amendment unless additional medical information or autopsy findings became available, which compelled a change to either or both decisions. That's the point. Why is the political uncle or the police or anyone convincing a medical examiner to change the outcome of his findings? That's interesting. On or about February 1st, 2011, the public, through a press release by the Philadelphia Police Department, was told of Dr. Osborne's and the MEO's medical findings as to the cause and manner of Ellen Greenberg's death. Inexplicably, however, days later, the Philadelphia Police Department, and not Dr. Osborne or the MEO, reversed course, insisting incorrectly that Ellen's case had not been ruled a homicide, but was instead being investigated as suspicious. Then, by February 18, 2011, the Philadelphia Police Department, without the concurrence of Dr. Osborne or the MEO, officially declared without explanation that the death of Ellen Greenberg had been ruled a suicide. Ostensibly bowing to the improper public pressure by the Philadelphia Police Department, the MEO and Dr. Osborne on March the 3rd, 2011, officially updated, without explanation, Ellen Greenberg's death certificate from homicide to suicide. On April 4th, 2011, Dr. Osborne, again without explanation, formally changed the manner of Ellen Greenberg's death on her certificate of death from homicide to suicide. A true and correct copy of the certificate of death dated April 4th, 2011 is attached here too and incorporated herein as Exhibit C. So we're looking at it and we're signing those petitions. Oh, yes. And we're not going to forget about this. Yeah, we will not stop. Exactly. Okay. So they say, only years later. I mean, guys, like, the parents are still fighting for Ellen in 2023. Like, okay, can you just make it undetermined then? Can we meet in the middle? I mean, it sounds like homicide. You're saying suicide. But can we just meet in the middle and make it undetermined? No, they're not doing that. Why? Why can't they at least do that? And even that, I don't feel like is enough. Man. So they say, only years later, in mid-October 2018, did Dr. Osborne honestly admit that, in complete dereliction of his legal duty never to delegate to non-medical parties like the police decisions pertaining to the determination of the manner of death in MEO cases, he had changed the manner of Ellen Greenberg's death in April 2011 solely at the insistence of the police because they said there was a lack of defense wounds. And as Ellen's dad explained in an interview with Kendall Ray, which was about 2 years ago, he was interviewed by Kendall Ray, a YouTuber. I'm sure you all know who Kendall Ray is. And in it, he said that it sounds like what police would call a blitz attack normally. No, not these police. These police are saying suicide. But a blitz attack is if someone attacks you so fast from behind that you can't even respond. So if someone were behind her and stabbed her 20 times rapidly, there wouldn't be defense wounds. Lack of defense wounds. Oh, wow, then it must be suicide. What? Recently provided additional medical information mandates amendment to Ellen Greenberg's April 4th, 2011 certificate of death. In September of 2019, plaintiffs formally requested Dr. Osborne voluntarily amend Ellen Greenberg's certification of death to reflect a manner of death other than suicide based on additional medical and other information of which Dr. Osborne was not familiar in early 2011, a substantial portion of which only became recently available to the plaintiffs. A true and correct copy of the letter dated September 3rd, 2019, without enclosures, is attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit D. The information in the package sent to Dr. Osborne included reports by several eminently qualified experts in the fields of medical forensics and neuropathology who have unanimously concluded that Ellen's death could not have been the result of a suicide. Even the fact that this Dr. Osborne changed it and admitted that he changed it due to the pressure from the police, I don't know how does he sleep at night too? Then speak up, then join us, in the fight. Do interviews, talk about it. I don't know if he's scared or something. Probably. Wayne K. Ross, MD, a well-credentialed board-certified pathologist who specializes in forensic pathology and neuropathology, conducted his own independent investigation, including a re-examination of Ellen's spinal cord specimen retained by the MEO, and concluded, beyond a doubt, among other things, that it simply is not possible that all of the wounds suffered by Ellen were self-inflicted. True and correct copies of the reports by Dr. Ross are attached hereto and incorporated herein as Exhibit E. Okay, so we carry on. Similarly, Cyril M. Wecht, MD. Also, did I say it right now? Last time people were saying, you said it so nicely, you said it correct. Hope I'm saying it correct now. Wecht. Cyril M. Wecht, MD, also a preeminent forensic pathologist, after conducting his own examination of the complete reports, concluded consistently with Dr. Ross that not only could this not have been a suicide, but that all pathological indications pointed toward homicide. A true and correct copy of Dr. Wecht's report is attached here too and incorporated herein as Exhibit F. Henry C. Lee, PhD of the Institute of Forensic Science at the University of New Haven, concluded after reviewing the entire case file that the number and type of wounds inflicted on Ellen Greenberg, as well as the blood stain patterns observed, were consistent with the scene of a homicide and not a suicide. A true and correct copy of Dr. Lee's report is attached here too and incorporated herein as Exhibit G. Consistent with these findings, as set forth in a March 15, 2019 article published in the Philadelphia Inquirer, Guy D'Andrea, a former Philadelphia homicide prosecutor who reviewed the entire case file before leaving the district attorney's office, Gregory McDonald, chief deputy coroner for Montgomery County, and Robert D. Keppel, retired chief criminal investigator for the Washington State Attorney General's office, all determined the physical evidence raised some serious questions, that not only undermined a finding of suicide in Ellen's case, but in some cases warranted a determination of homicide. So they had a lot of experts weigh in on the case, and all the experts are in agreement that, this does not look like a suicide. Then they said the letter accompanying the package also referenced other considerations which warranted the change of the manner of Ellen's death from suicide. For instance, the letter discusses the substantial forensic evidence suggesting more than one weapon was used in Ellen's death. That also was crazy. More than one weapon was possibly used in her death and they never found the other knife, although only one was recovered at the scene. According to Dr. Ross, powerful evidence exists which establishes that two knives, one serrated and one smooth-bladed, were used in Ellen's death, although the only knife recovered at the scene was of the serrated variety and found embedded deep in Ellen's chest. So that means I got that the wrong way around when I made my little episode. the 33-minute one. The story time, I thought it was the other way around. I thought the serrated one was the one that, was used on her head. And the smoother one was found in her chest. That's what my research showed, but not based on this document. So this document, I would say, is more accurate, of course. They say the import of Dr. Ross's conclusion cannot be overstated. If a second knife was used in Ellen's death but not recovered at the scene, someone other than Ellen necessarily disposed of it, which alone rules out suicide as a cause of death. Even, remember the door was damaged a little bit? Wait, let's do it like this. The door had some damage with that swing lock, but there was a screw missing. And that screw was not just found in the apartment. Someone had cleaned it up. So that's also something to consider. In addition, expert analysis and a crime scene recreation recently completed persuasively established that not all of Ellen's wounds could have possibly been self-inflicted. According to Dr. Ross, she would have been rendered physically incapable of inflicting more wounds before the final stab was administered to Ellen's chest. Ellen suffered a significant wound at the base of her skull that penetrated her brain by several centimeters. This particular wound resulted from an upward strike to the base of the skull that would have been difficult, if not impossible, for her to inflict on herself. Moreover, Dr. Ross conducted a forensic examination of a preserved sample of spinal tissue and concluded that the injury inflicted on the nervous system by this blow would have rendered Ellen incapacitated and incapable of performing further harm, up to and including the final stab wound to the chest. A recreation report included in the package sent to Dr. Osborne adds further credibility to Dr. Ross's conclusion that the position, angle, force, and number of Ellen's wounds suggest Ellen could not have inflicted all the wounds she sustained on herself. The recent submission to Dr. Osborne similarly raises serious questions about the nature and extent of another medical professional's involvement, Dr. Lucy Rourke Adams, in Ellen's case in 2011, on which the police purportedly, relied in contending Ellen's death was due to suicide. According to the police investigators, when confronted with questions arising from the irregular wound pattern on Ellen's body, particularly the frequency and severity of certain injuries preceding the final chest wound as noted above, the investigators reached out to Dr. Rourke Adams, a neuropathologist with whom the Philadelphia police and MEO consulted from time to time. The police investigators represent in a passing reference that Dr. Rourke Adams concluded after conducting an examination of the spinal tissue that the damage inflicted at the base of the skull to the brain and spine could have resulted in Ellen merely becoming numb to the pain of the subsequent stab wounds while leaving her still sufficiently ambulatory to inflict further wounds. That just sounds crazy. So then they say, but there is no evidence that Dr. Rourke Adams ever conducted any examination of Ellen's spinal tissue in 2011. So this one is saying, this Dr. Rourke Adams says, well, maybe Ellen just went numb after those injuries, right? And then tried to explain how it's still possible to stab oneself more after that. But they say, but there's no evidence that Dr. Rourke Adams ever conducted any examination of Ellen's spinal tissue in 2011. She never issued a report, was never paid for her services, and although there are records of Dr. Rourke Adams performing examinations on the days preceding and following the date of her alleged examination of Ellen's spinal tissue, there are no records that she performed any work for the city of Philadelphia on the date noted in the report. Furthermore, Dr. Rourke Adams has no recollection of consulting with the police department or MEO on that date, and there's no corroborating record of her being picked up and brought to the MEO as the reports suggest. In fact, in interviews with the Philadelphia Inquirer, Dr. Rourke Adams claimed to have no recollection of the case at all, and further stated the lack of any invoice or report of her findings confirms she had no involvement in the case. Can you believe it? It's just, really? You're gonna give you're gonna give information to say, well, it is possible that after stabbing oneself somehow in the back of the head, then you could just continue to stab yourself. She gives that, but then, there's actually no invoice, there's no proof that she was even ever involved in the case or even ever saw any findings in this case. Dr. Rourke Adams' purported involvement is crucial, as her medical conclusion is a necessary element in the ultimate suicide finding. For without any explanation as to how it was physiologically possible for Ellen to inflict further wounds to her own person after suffering a blow that substantially severed her spinal cord, the ultimate finding of suicide would have been impossible. So this person who contradicts what everyone else says, when put on the spot, is like, I don't know, I wasn't even involved at all. Not at all. So that really sucks, right? Okay, the letter accompanying the package sent to Dr. Osborne also drew his attention to blood pattern evidence, which suggests Ellen's body was moved or repositioned post-mortem. That is a huge red flag. Upon review of the crime scene photographs and other evidence, the independent experts have concluded that Ellen was lying down and later moved into the sitting position in which she was discovered by investigators. For example, clear from the photographs of the scene is a trail of blood running horizontally, parallel to the floor, along the side of Ellen's face, which Detective Scott Eelman confirmed defies the laws of gravity and means Ellen's body was moved after the blood had already dried. So they say Detective Eelman, a specialist in crime scene reconstruction who regularly pairs with Dr. Ross, also analyzed the bloodstains on Ellen's sweatpants, sweatshirt, and shoes, and found other evidence consistent with her being moved or repositioned post-mortem, concluding that she had been in a position different from that in which she was found at the time the blood was deposited on her sweatpants, sweatshirt, and shoes. A true and correct copy of Detective Eelman's report is attached here too and incorporated herein as Exhibit H. He further concluded that Ellen's head had been in several positions during the time of blood flow, and for long enough as to have the blood flow across her face and back toward up her ear, upward towards her eyes, and also downward toward her chin in a manner that is inconsistent with the position in which Ellen was found by investigators. Reference is made in the letter to Dr. Osborne to the absence of any evidence, explicit or implicit, that on January 26, 2011, Ellen intended to kill herself or wished to die, and that she understood the probable consequences of her actions. Instead, the events leading up to Ellen's death are inconsistent with suicide. After leaving work early that day due to the snowstorm, Ellen filled her car's empty gas tank. Also, Ellen was halfway through preparing a fruit salad when the stabbings began, which salad was left unfinished on the counter, as seen in the photographs of the scene. I did show a photograph of that in that episode that is already on YouTube. In addition, Ellen's treating psychiatrist, Ellen Berman, MD, is adamant that Ellen was not suicidal. All the wounds to Ellen's chest and abdomen were inflicted through her clothing, which, as the investigators concluded, is highly unusual in cases of suicide. In nearly all documented cases, an individual will lift his or her clothing and stab directly into bare skin. As the independent experts have indicated, Ellen's behavior is not consistent with someone preparing to commit suicide, and when considered in light of other serious questions surrounding her death, suggests another explanation. In the same vein, Ellen's history and behavior are not consistent with those associated with someone intending to commit suicide. Ellen made no verbal or nonverbal expressions of intent to kill herself. No implicit or indirect evidence of intent to die exists. She did not express feelings of hopelessness. She did not rehearse fatal behavior. She made no preparations for death, inappropriate to or unexpected in the context of her life. She made no expressions of farewell or desire to die, or acknowledgement of impending death. She's made no previous suicide attempt or even previously threatened suicide. She did not have serious depression or mental disorder as confirmed by Dr. Berman. She left no suicide note. I mean, she was talking about taxes with her mom that morning, saying on her way to school that she's still got to do all her taxes and sort all that out. She left school early, filled up her gas tank, and then went home to relax and then make fruit salad. That is just quite something, huh? Moreover, as further pointed out in the letter to Dr. Osborne, the arguments raised to support a finding of suicide by Ellen are at best inconclusive and plainly require further investigation. The principal factor in concluding Ellen's death was suicide was the claim that the front door to her apartment was locked from the inside, with a safety bar engaged just prior to and at the time of her death. But as noted in the letter accompanying the package to Dr. Osborne, that the door was locked from the inside just prior to and at the time of Ellen's death was merely accepted and was never itself properly tested. As noted in the expert reports and visible in the photographs of the apartment, the safety bar remained intact and undamaged, and although disengaged, was still attached, albeit loosely, to the door and door frame, respectively. Had the door been forced open from the outside without first disengaging the safety bar, as the investigators concluded, at least one of its ends necessarily would have been ripped from its screws in either the door or the door frame. Tests performed by one investigator using an identical mechanism repeatedly confirmed this. Contrariwise, the damaged but functional safety bar depicted in the photograph was consistent with the application of force to the door, but not entry, as if the door had been pulled from the inside, causing the damage seen in the photographs and then manually disengaged. The letter to Dr. Osborne also points out that although a forced entry was reported by Ellen's fiancé, who told the police investigators that upon finding the safety bar engaged and Ellen not responding to his text messages, he kicked the door open in the presence of a member of the building's security. The member of the security staff allegedly present when Ellen's fiancé allegedly kicked in the door is firm that he was not present as claimed. So his whole story fell apart there. Sam Goldberg, her fiancé, said that he went downstairs to fetch the security guy and brought him up with him, and that he was there when he kicked in the door and found Ellen. But the security staff member said he was never there. He stayed in his office all day. He told Sam that he cannot go with him to break into the apartment, break safety protocol. Another of the factors cited by the Philadelphia police in support of the finding of suicide was the lack of defensive wounds on Ellen's hands and arms, which wounds the police contend would be expected on the victim of a knife attack of this nature. However, as Dr. Ross explained in his report, the stab wound inflicted upward at the base of Ellen's skull to her spine and brain would have been incapacitating and made further resistance impossible. Moreover, Dr. Ross did find evidence of fresh bruises and a fingernail imprint on Ellen's neck, suggesting that she may have been physically overwhelmed and rendered defenseless by her attacker at the outset of the altercation, further explaining the lack of defensive wounds customary in knife attacks. Moreover, a lack of defensive wounds is not unheard of in these instances, particularly when the victim is attacked quickly so as not to be able to defend herself, what one investigator described as the proverbial blitz attack. Okay, as you can see, it's a long document. Huh? We're only on page 17. A suggestion likewise has been made that Ellen's mental state supports a finding of suicide. As discussed in the letter to Dr. Osborne, Ellen had obtained treatment for her anxiety in the weeks preceding her death, and there's no indication from her therapist or elsewhere that Ellen had exhibited a predisposition towards self-harm or that she entertained any suicidal ideations at any time. In fact, Dr. Berman maintains Ellen did not exhibit any indications of suicidal ideation while under her professional care. Prescribed Klonopin for anxiety, the toxicology screens showed levels in her system that were consistent with a prescribed dosage, and that Ellen was using the medication as directed. To me, it sounds like the possibility of DV goes hand in hand with why she was experiencing anxiety. It seems to possibly match, the bruises, the upcoming wedding, and then the anxiety, and then like needing this help and wanting to quit a job and move back home. All of that could be in line with when speculatively DV, domestic violence, started. Similarly, the claim that websites accessed and internet searches conducted from Ellen's laptop demonstrate a predisposition to suicide is not founded. Ellen's web browser history has not been fully analyzed, and issues involving access to the internet from her laptop have never been fully investigated. The question whether Ellen or someone else was in possession of the laptop when the internet was accessed remains unanswered. The reason why certain websites were accessed from her laptop have not been explored. For instance, it remains unknown whether the links were accessed because they involved current event stories or for some other purpose. These and other relevant inquiries may only be answered through investigation that has not to date been started, let alone completed. The abundance of evidence gathered and analyzed to date raises serious questions regarding Ellen Greenberg's manner of death, and Dr. Osborne, having prepared the 2 prior certificates of death, ruling the manner of Ellen's death as a homicide and suicide, respectively, is charged under the law with the responsibility of revising his previous conclusions if necessary based on newly discovered evidence and analyses. Despite receipt of the package and ample time to review and consider the information contained within it, Dr. Osborne has not indicated a willingness to voluntarily change the manner of death on Ellen Greenberg's certificate of death dated April 4th, 2011, nor has he made any attempt to contact representatives of the plaintiffs to discuss any aspect of the contents of the letter and or the materials enclosed with the letter. So the April 4th, 2011 changing of the manner of death on Ellen's certificate of death from homicide to suicide has harmed and continues to harm the estate of Ellen Greenberg, deceased, and has other far-reaching negative consequences. The information in the certificate of death is considered prima facie evidence of the fact of death that can be introduced in court as evidence and would have evidentiary value in a claim or dispute involving Ellen's estate. Also, like it or not, our society stigmatizes suicide, disparaging the person who ended her life as selfish, crazy, and looking for an easy way out. Further, the stigma deprives surviving family members of the closure and peace of mind to which they are otherwise entitled. Furthermore, the contents of the death certificate, particularly the sections on cause and manner of death, are the source for state and national mortality statistics and are relied upon to determine which medical conditions receive research and development funding, to set public health goals, and to measure health status at local, state, national, and international levels. Said another way, the important statistical data derived from death certificates can be no more accurate or reliable than the information provided on the certificate. Similarly, the mortality data collected from the information in death certificates, like the one at issue, are valuable to physicians indirectly, as these data influence funding for medical and health research, which may alter clinical practice, and directly as a research tool. Research topics include examining medical or mental health problems that may be found among specific groups of people and indicating areas in which medical research have the greatest impact on reducing mortality. In addition, the goals of securing justice and promoting criminal accountability are impeded by death certificates containing inaccurate causes or manners of death. Okay. So here they're talking about distinguishing pertinent matters of death as follows. Suicide results from an injury or poisoning as a result of intentional self-inflicted act committed to do self-harm or cause the death of oneself. Homicide occurs when death results from an injury or poisoning or from a volitional act committed by another person to cause fear, harm, or death. Intent to cause death is a common element but is not required for classification as homicide, which is important in DV cases. Now, being stabbed 20 times, I think there the intent was to cause homicide, but you know what I mean. And then could not be determined, which is what they're fighting for, at least at a minimum standard. Used when the information pointing to one manner of death is no more compelling than one or more other competing manners of death when all available information is considered. This is City of Philadelphia, Office of the Medical Examiner, 321 University Avenue, and all that. Decedent name, Ellen R. Greenberg. Age, 27 years. Race white, sex female, height 5'7", weight 136 pounds. Pronounced dead by medic. It doesn't say medic 5, 8, I don't know, medic, okay. At the 4601 Flat Rock Road, unit number 603, I think it is, on the 26th of January 2011, and there it says 6:40 p.m. Witness name Joshua Greenberg, and the relation father. Findings, multiple, now you can see here already, it says homicide, manner of death homicide. This was the original death certificate. Findings, multiple stab wounds to the chest, abdomen, and back of neck. There is an incised wound to the right occipital scalp. The wounds are associated injuries to the aortic arch, the upper lobe of the left lung, liver, and the cervical spinal cord at C2, C3 level dorsally. There are bilateral hemothoraces, carditum, I think, a small collection of subarachnoid blood over the vermis and the base of the right cerebellar hemisphere. The knife, 12.5 centimeter blade, is present in one of the wounds, one of the chest wounds, at a depth of 10 centimeters. Multiple contusions, upper and lower extremities in various stages of resolution. Those are all those different bruises. Okay. Cause of death, multiple stab wounds, other significant conditions. They don't list something there. And manner of death, homicide. So we could see it here loud and clear. It says homicide. Okay. We could see that. My word. That's the initial death certificate. This says case number, same up there, January 26th, 2011. Decedent name, Ellen R. Greenberg. An autopsy was performed on the body of the decedent at the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office on January 27, 2011. The external examination was started at approximately 9 a.m. The internal examination was started at approximately 11 a.m. Clothing. The clothing that accompanies the decedent consists of gray or purple hooded sweatshirt, gray sweatpants, and brown boots. Dear Dr. Osborne, I write in regards to the 2011 death of Ellen Greenberg and your ultimate findings to alert you to a number of questions that cast serious doubt in the minds of various medical and neuropathological experts as to your conclusion that Ellen's cause of death was suicide. In our view, these questions warrant a closer examination of the case, further investigation of the circumstances surrounding her untimely death, and ultimately your voluntary amendment of Ellen's death certificate to include a cause of death other than suicide as permitted under Pennsylvania law. The telling basis for the requested amendment by you of the cause of death listed on Ellen's death certificate are discussed below. But before you consider them, please allow me to address a preliminary matter that you are probably thinking. Do I have the authority to amend Ellen's death certificate despite my no longer being associated with the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office? The answer is yes. Pennsylvania law specifically empowers only you with a continuing authority to amend Ellen's. Okay. Only you. Okay. That's good to know. With a continuing authority to amend Ellen's death certificate to change the cause of death from suicide to something else, despite your no longer acting as a pathologist in Pennsylvania. Moreover, I would be happy to prepare and send you the documents needed to effectuate the requested amendment. After reviewing the remainder of this letter, I would appreciate if you would notify me of your willingness or unwillingness to amend Ellen's death certificate within 14 days of the date of this letter. I will presume your unwillingness should I receive no response from you within the specified time. As you read the remainder of this letter, please keep in mind that the estate of Ellen Greenberg and her family only want to learn the truth surrounding Ellen's death. They believe the truth cannot be determined absent a more comprehensive investigation into the circumstances surrounding Ellen's death. As a human being, don't you believe that they are entitled to some closure and hopefully peace of mind from Ellen's untimely and unnatural passing? You see, this guy, Dr. Osborne, experts unanimously conclude Ellen's death was not a suicide. Enclosed are copies of reports by several eminently qualified experts in the fields of medical forensics and neuropathology who have unanimously concluded that Ellen's death could not have been the result of a suicide. Now, the rest we've gone over in the previous readout that we did. So they're telling of all those professionals' findings and why they all believe that this could not be a suicide. As briefly summarized below, the unanimous conclusions of these experts, coupled with other serious concerns militating against a finding of suicide, warrant your reconsideration of Ellen's cause of death and ultimately your amendment of her death certificate to reflect a cause of death other than suicide. Other material considerations warranting the reconsideration of Ellen's cause of death. 1. Evidence that 2 knives were used in Ellen's death. According to Dr. Wayne K. Ross, MD, there's substantial forensic evidence suggesting that more than one weapon was used in Ellen's death, although only one was recovered at the scene. Dr. Ross concluded a strong likelihood that 2 knives, one serrated and one smooth-bladed, were used in Ellen's death, although the only knife recovered at the scene was one of the serrated variety and found embedded 4 inches in Ellen's chest. The import of Dr. Ross's conclusion cannot be overstated if a second knife was used in Ellen's death but not recovered at the scene. If you guys didn't hear the 911 call, do check out the initial episode I did on this case, which is on Grizzly True Crime. I've got a playlist for this case as well, because there's so much to work through as well. Check that out and listen to that, because it is so weird to me that the fiancé, let me do it like this, that on that 911 call, and he's talking, they're like, can you administer CPR? Is she okay? And then he's like, oh my word, she stabbed herself. Like, I mean, they say as you walk in, you can see her with the knife in her chest, but he claims to not have seen that initially. He's just like, I don't know what's going on. And that call is just weird. That call in itself is quite a red flag. Okay, so they say someone other than Ellen disposed of that second knife, of which alone rules out suicide as a cause of death. 2, studies of the wound pattern suggest not all could have been self-inflicted. 3, questions concerning the involvement of Dr. Lucy Rourke Adams. I'm just giving you the bullet points here because we've gone over that already. 4, blood pattern evidence suggests that Ellen's body was moved or repositioned. 5, the knife block suggests altercation. So here they say the condition of the crime scene raises serious questions for the independent experts that, for these experts, support a finding of homicide rather than suicide. Among these questionable conditions, the heavy knife block from which at least one weapon was retrieved was found laying on its side, pulled over with sufficient force to have knocked 2 of the knives stored therein across the counter and into the sink. The condition of the knife block and knives is consistent with someone grabbing a knife quickly and forcefully, as if in the midst of an altercation with another individual, rather than that of a person who, alone in the kitchen, pulled a knife out for use, at least initially, for the preparation of a fruit salad. 6, Ellen's behavior that day is not consistent with suicide. So we've got all that. They say Dr. Osborne, in nearly all documented cases, an individual will lift his or her clothing and stab directly into the skin. As the independent experts have indicated, Ellen's behavior is not consistent with someone preparing to commit suicide, and when considered in light of other serious questions surrounding her death, suggest another explanation. Facts suggested to support a finding of suicide are inconclusive or require further investigation. 1, the door locked from the inside. We're gonna go over that now. Okay, let's look at this. The facts suggested to support a finding of suicide are inconclusive or require further investigation. 1, the door locked from the inside. That the door was locked from the inside with a safety bar engaged was the principal factor in concluding that Ellen's death was a suicide. Indeed, this factor was so critical in the minds of the original investigators, the remainder of the investigation seemed an exercise in uncovering explanations, no matter how unlikely, to justify that initial prejudgment. But that the door was locked from the inside at the time of Ellen's death was merely accepted and was never itself properly tested. As noted in the expert reports and visible in the photographs of the apartment, the safety bar remained intact and undamaged, and although disengaged, was still attached, albeit loosely, to the door and door frame, respectively. Had the door been forced open from the outside, without first disengaging the safety bar, as the investigators concluded, at least one of its ends would necessarily have been ripped from its screws in either the door or the door frame. Tests performed by one investigator using an identical mechanism repeatedly confirmed this. Contrary-wise, the damaged but functional safety bar depicted in the photograph was consistent with the application of force to the door, but not entry, as if the door had been pulled from the inside, causing the damage seen in the photographs and then manually disengaged. Although a forced entry was reported by Ellen's fiancé, who told the police investigators that upon finding the safety bar engaged and Ellen not responding to his text messages, he kicked the door open in the presence of a member of the building security. The member of security, that guy said he wasn't even with him, right? Then they say there's a lack of defensive wounds. So we've gone over this mental state, okay? And then the conclusion, this is from Joseph R. Podraza, CC Dr. Joshua Greenberg. This is a case that requires a closer examination and more thorough investigation, which can only be accomplished by your amending Ellen's death certificate. So that is step 1. This Dr. Osborne needs to change her death certificate at least to could not be determined in order to proceed. Wow. Can you imagine that? It's just so tragic to hear this. So, it requires a closer look at which can only be accomplished by your amending Ellen's death certificate to reflect a cause of death other than suicide. A conclusion of suicide is simply not supported by the evidence, and in light of the facts and circumstances raised by independent experts, constitutes a capricious exercise of discretion. Thank you for your prompt attention to this matter. Ellen's estate, her family, and I strongly urge you to agree to amend her death certificate to enable her to receive justice. I look forward to hearing from you. Here they say, Dear Mr. Brennan, at your request, I reviewed materials pertaining to the death of Ellen Greenberg, who was found dead in her apartment in Philadelphia after sustaining multiple stab wounds. The knife was still in her chest. In addition, blood-stained evidence was observed around the body in the kitchen. The door entrance locking mechanism or door was damaged. The autopsy was performed by the Philadelphia medical examiner. The cause of death was multiple stab wounds, and the original manner of death was homicide. That is so frustrating. That the original cause and the original manner of death was homicide. And then to be like, whoops, no, let's change that. Now it's going to be suicide. That is just so disturbing. Later, the medical examiner changed the manner of death to suicide. It's my opinion that the investigating authorities should pursue this case as a homicide. It's further my opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that the manner of death is a homicide. I mean, these experts are willing to put their jobs on the line, be like, hello, this is obviously not suicide, it's homicide, and sign it and everything and write and plead. And still, 2023, nothing is done. So materials received were inspection date of organ tissue, August 3rd, 2016, scene photographs, autopsy report, and autopsy photographs. After review of the above information, I can offer the following opinions to a reasonable degree of medical certainty. There was evidence of a stab wound which penetrated the cranial cavity and severed the cranial nerves and brain. As a result, she would experience severe pain, cranial nerve dysfunction, and traumatic brain signs and symptoms, including numbness, tingling, irregular heartbeat, and bradycardia, respiratory depression, neurogenic shock, and impaired loss of consciousness. There was evidence of strangulation. Okay. What? There was evidence of strangulation. There was a mark over the front of the neck, which was consistent with a fingernail mark. There were multiple bruises under the neck and in the strap muscles over the right side of the neck. The patterns were compatible with a manual strangulation. You see that? There were multiple bruises over the body, some of which were fresh, many of which were older. The patterns were consistent with a repeated beating. The scene findings were indicative of a homicide. If you didn't know, if you didn't see the original episode, they said that Ellen's body was propped up, right, with a horizontal line of dried blood, which makes no sense with propped up, right? So her body had been moved and staged because she was also in her one hand holding a pristine white towel, super clean white towel. That is crazy. It almost would make one think, like, I mean, who did this, and have they ever done this before? Because damn. I mean, even that cannot be explained. To be like, yep, she did this to herself. Okay, but then at what point did she get a pristine white towel? It doesn't make any sense. Dear Dr. Greenberg, pursuant to your request, I've reviewed all records and materials pertaining to the death of your daughter. Clinical summary. Miss Ellen Greenberg, 27 years old, was found dead by her fiancé, Mr. Samuel Goldberg, in their locked apartment on January 26, 2011. Mr. Goldberg reported that he had left the apartment for the gym in the apartment building at 16:45 that afternoon and returned between 7:15 to 17:30. He stated that he tried to contact the decedent via text message, telephone, and email for approximately 1 hour in attempting to get back in. You see that? That's why I said that in my original episode. For approximately an hour, he says he tried to contact her. I mean, even that, it makes no sense to me. I mean, yes, and the drag mark. I mean, to say for about an hour, he was trying to contact her. And remember the text? I read it out to you, what he had texted. It was increasingly angry and aggressive. I wonder if in his mind, he thought, what I'm going to do is sound really angry because no one would then suspect, that it would be possible that he could do something like this. He's not a suspect, remember that. So there's not even the innocent till proven guilty here. There's no suspect because they say she did it to herself. But even the fact those text messages, I mean, they sounded scary in themselves. Like, you better have a good excuse. Like, hello, why aren't you opening the door? You're really pissing me off now. I mean, okay. Wow. So if you think of it, if there is any possibility that he did something to her, think of those text messages. That's even worse, to think of such angry messages written to her even after the fact. So they say here, he tried to contact the decedent by text message for about an hour in attempting to get back in, but he got no response. Confirmed by incoming text and email, in decedent's cell phone between 17:32 and 17:54. Yeah, that's not an hour. He thinks it is. It's like about an hour. The 911 call was made at 18:33. The solid bar door guard was broken, consistent with Mr. Goldberg's report of forcing in the door. An apartment security man was reportedly present during Mr. Goldberg's entry. He was briefly instructed to start CPR until he noticed a knife in her chest and was instructed to stop. What? Like, you just missed the big knife in her chest? It's like, ooh, let me start that CPR, shall I? Oh my word, there's a knife. I mean, dude. Medics pronounced death at 1840. There was no evidence of a struggle. Valuables were present and nothing was missing in the apartment. They even said that her engagement ring, was found on one of the counters in the house. That uncle that had come back the next day and the cousin to take Ellen's personal laptop, work laptop, cell phone, and Sam's laptop. All of that, the electronics they took out, the ring was left there, which to me also feels like a statement, you know? So they say here there was no evidence of a struggle, valuables were present, and nothing was missing in the apartment. The decedent was found supine in the kitchen, her head and upper body resting against the lower half of the kitchen cabinets. Blood was present on the head, in the hair, on the neck. Multiple chest wounds were observed. A knife was embedded in her left chest. It was a single-edged serrated blade, approximately 12.5 centimeters in length and 1.5 centimeters wide, with a handle approximately 12.5 centimeters in length. The right hand with blood in it was closed in a loose fist. There was no note or anything to indicate suicide on the computers or in the rest of the well-kept apartment. The last outgoing call in the decedent's cell phone was for 30 seconds on 1/26/11 at 14:33. The recipient of the telephone call was not identified. The decedent was clothed in a t-shirt, sweatpants, underwear, a zippered shirt, and Ugg boots. Blood was present on the head, in the hair, on the front side of the shirts, on the front of her pants, and on the top of both boots. You see that on the top of both boots, which also makes no sense, meaning repositioned, right? She was standing when attacked. A pair of eyeglasses was on the floor to her right. A white towel was grasped in her left hand. It's not known if there was blood on the towel. A hair tie, scrunchie, was on her right wrist. So her dad apparently said that towel was super clean when he was talking to Kendall Ray. The decedent was in a committed relationship with Sam Goldberg. They had been together for 3 years and were recently engaged. Her parents had no reservations about the relationship. There is no knowledge of any verbal or physical abuse. No report of a detailed interrogation of the fiancé is available. How did the decedent behave before Mr. Goldberg went to the gym only 30 minutes earlier? He didn't answer any of those questions, did he now? Her mother stated that when she spoke with the decedent that morning, they had a pleasant conversation. She gave no indication that something was imminently wrong. Her mother knew that her daughter was struggling with something. Ms. Greenberg was seeing a psychiatrist, Dr. Ellen Berman. Ms. Greenberg visited the psychiatrist on January 12th, 17th, and 19th. She was upset and stressed about her job as a school teacher for the District of Philadelphia, where she'd been employed for 3 years. She had expressed that she was overwhelmed with her classroom work. She had been prescribed Zoloft first and then switched to a low dose of Xanax. After no success, the doctor prescribed Ambien and Klonopin. On January 17th, it was specifically noted by the psychiatrist, she starts thinking about everything else, not suicidal. On January 19th, Dr. Berman noted, way better. Ms. Greenberg denied any verbal or physical confrontations with her fiancé. Also reviewed is a diary-like emailed account. Miss Ellen Greenberg reportedly responded to this close friend's text on January 26th about 12 p.m. saying, yeah, you are getting out early. Philadelphia schools were getting out early on account of the snowstorm. Miss Greenberg's response was, thank goodness. This same friend went to Miss Greenberg's apartment with Mr. and Mrs. Greenberg about a month after her death. She narrates that Mrs. Greenberg found blood on the bathroom floor near the gym. Okay. On the bathroom floor near the gym, recalling that her daughter's fiancé was in the gym on the day of her friend's death. They notified the police, who came to take samples on the floor of the apartment where they smelt MJ. Dr. Greenberg, the decedent's father, apparently told the police that Mr. Sam Goldberg smoked a lot and that police had found marijuana and paraphernalia in the apartment the night of Miss Greenberg's death. So they say, as published in newspapers on... Okay, sorry. We're going back to the MJ, right? Then he was smoking a lot. Let's go back there. Dr. Greenberg, the decedent's father, apparently told the police that Mr. Sam Goldberg smoked a lot and that police had found marijuana and paraphernalia in the apartment the night of Miss Greenberg's death. Miss Ellen Greenberg was suggested to have known her fiancé engaged in this drug usage, but she did not participate in such activity. As published in newspapers on February the 1st, 2011, the medical examiner's office ruled the death as a homicide based on the Philadelphia Police Department's announcement on January 28th. A few days later, the police department backed away, making a statement that the case had not been ruled a homicide and was being investigated as suspicious. However, on February 18, 2011, the police retracted their original ruling and officially declared that the death of Ellen Greenberg had been ruled a suicide. Philadelphia City Assistant Medical Examiner Marlon Osborne, MD, listed multiple stab wounds as the cause of death. The manner was ruled to be suicide. There were multiple stab wounds to the chest, 8, abdomen, 1, back of neck, 10, and scalp, 1, 20. A knife with 12.5 centimeter blade was present in the 10 centimeter deep chest wound. There were injuries to the aortic arch, the left upper lung lobe, liver, dorsal cervical spinal cord at C2, C3. They were associated bilateral hemothorax and hemopericardium. The wounds were listed as follows, and you can see all of those. Multiple contusions in various stages of resolution were present in the upper and lower extremities. These are all multiple different bruises, a real sign of DV. Upper, lower extremities, right upper arm, right forearm, 3. Right lower abdomen, right thigh, round contusions in a vertical row and above the right knee. 223 color photographs at the scene and at autopsy have been submitted. No toxicology reports are found in the material submitted. Reportedly, the tests were negative. Ms. Greenberg had seen psychiatrist Dr. Ellen Berman. Her handwritten notes from 3 patient visits have been reviewed. There had not been any summary of a detailed interrogation of the fiancé. I just had to listen now, pronounce it. Okay, what was the most likely manner of death? Suicidal stab wounds can rarely be multiple. Suicides by stabbing are becoming less frequent, with simpler choices being drugs, hanging, or gunshot. I hope that's not triggering to anyone. Cutting of the wrist and throat is often associated with suicide, whereas stab wounds to the back are unlikely to be suicide. A murder usually involves multiple stab wounds to the side, back, or stomach. In a suicide, there may be additional cuts across the wrist or tentative stabbings to see if it will hurt or to work up courage. Then there will usually be one wound and most likely in the chest. The multiple stab wounds to the back, this is now from January 11, 2012. The multiple stab wounds to the back of the upper neck and lower head found at the autopsy were unlikely suicidal stab wounds, especially in the different directions. I mean, there's that as well. The locations of the stab wounds high up the back of the neck and lower back and head are also unlikely for self-inflicted wounds. A suicide victim will frequently leave a note. There was none. There was also no indication that the decedent was suicidal from the standpoint of her own family, friends, professional associates, and the psychiatrist who had evaluated her. There had not been any indication that she had the intention to commit suicide or was depressed during the day that she was found dead. She seemed her usual self in the morning when she had a telephone conversation with her mother and later at midday during her texting with a friend at approximately noon. It would be important to find out from the fiancé how she behaved barely half an hour before when he left their apartment, as he claimed. A suicide victim will rarely stab herself through her clothing. Instead, she'll open her shirt to expose the skin. Stabbing through clothing may indicate homicide. It's not known if fingerprints on the knife were taken and examined. Opinion. Following the review of all submitted documents, the results of the autopsy, and the accounts from the investigation, based upon reasonable degree of medical certainty, it's my professional opinion on the manner of death of Ellen Greenberg is strongly suspicious of homicide. So this is gavinfish.com. Here's the fruit. Like, look at the fruit salad she was making. Freshly washed blueberries and an orange just cut up like that. Just, wow. Okay. This is the apartment. And that's how the door was damaged. Just like that. They say in what we just read in the report, it seemed more like it was pulled from the inside. There's a close-up as well. And showing the bruising and everything. Oh my goodness. Now what I wanted to show you here, look at the case documents, you guys. When I first saw this, I'm like, oh, okay, wow. He's got a whole thing here. And I'm like, whoa, he's got so many documents. What the hell's going on here? But look at it. And so that one at the top label, it says, wait, this says case documents. Then this says court documents, Greenberg versus Osborne. You can see all the complaints and everything. Look at it. You see them documents. You love documents. You're going to have to go here. Even I'm a little overwhelmed, okay? I see this and I'm overwhelmed. So I think it's good that I've even managed to get over that overwhelm and cover the case. Because when I saw this, I'm like, oh my word, there's so much here. Like, what? Look at it. We're still going. We are still going. Court documents. You see this? Again. Then Schwartzman Goldberg family demand for retraction. Those documents too. And then here's a timeline. Jane was asking earlier. I've got a timeline on my episode as well. So they say January 26, 2011, Ellen puts gas in her car. And then she calls Vitri Restaurant. It's unclear if she was calling to make, confirm, or cancel a reservation. Source confidential. Ellen sends her final text at 3:47 p.m. The last activity on Ellen's computer was at 4:46 p.m. You see that? That bothers me too. Because that's when he was going to the gym. The last activity on laptop. See, and then Sam goes to the gym at 4:50. 4 minutes later. Sam Goldberg enters the gym on the first floor of Venice Loft's apartments. Then January 26, 2011, Sam exits the gym. Sam Goldberg exits the gym on the first floor Venice Loft apartments. I'm going to see if we can look at that. Then 6:14 p.m., Sam Goldberg calls Kamian Schwartzman, his cousin. And then Sam Goldberg answers a phone call from James Schwartzman, which is his uncle. So he called his cousin, told him the stuff. The uncle then's like, all right, hopping on the phone. Don't worry, bro. I got your back, basically. 6:26 p.m., right? And then last time Sam is seen on video, he's last seen on the video provided by the Philadelphia Police Department. That's at 6:28 p.m. Sam Goldberg makes the 911 call, okay, at 6:31 p.m. At 6:33, the emergency responders are dispatched to Ellen and Sam's apartment. Then the cousin arrives on scene at 6:34 p.m. And then at 6:36, emergency responders arrive on the scene. And at 6:40, Ellen Greenberg is pronounced dead. January 26, 2011, Sam Goldberg is taken in handcuffs to be questioned by police. Interesting. I have not seen that. Sam Goldberg questioned by police in the presence of his attorney. January 27th, early morning hours, Ellen Greenberg is taken to the office of the medical examiner. And then on January 27th, 9 a.m., the autopsy is performed by Dr. Marlon Osborne. And so we go on. Okay. So, okay, I'll just finish the January 27th. James C. Schwartzman requests access to the apartment. According to Melissa Ware, the apartment manager at the time, she's contacted by Sam's uncle, asking for her help entering the apartment in order to get a suit for Sam for Ellen's funeral. Oh, he needs to get in there to get a suit for Ellen's funeral. Miss Ware contacts the police to ask permission to let him enter. They tell her that the crime scene has been released so he can enter. They also tell her she can call crime scene cleanup to come clean up the apartment. You guys. The police even allowed the apartment to be cleaned. What? Melissa Ware creates a video record of the apartment. In order to protect her employer, Miss Ware makes a video recording of the state of the apartment prior to having the apartment cleaned. There's a few things we still have to look at. Okay, January 27th, James C. Schwartzman removes cell phones, laptops, and other items from the apartment. Then there's a crime scene cleanup, cleans the apartment. Wow. Marlon Osborne creates draft autopsy report, finds homicide. With the initial finding of homicide, police apply for a search warrant. The search warrant was executed on January 8th. Police seize assorted clothing, blood samples, a diamond ring, latent prints, and Rubbermaid container. Of course, this all happened after the crime scene was professionally cleaned. Cell phones and laptops are retrieved by the police from James C. Schwartzman after. How could they be like, okay, that's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead and clean. Here we go. We've got the uncle over here, the cousin over here, Richard Goldberg, Mindy Goldberg. Oh, his parents. Here's Sam. Here he is too. James Schwartzman on the far right came in with hand on Sam Goldberg's shoulder. Richard Goldberg in purple tie, third from left. Okay. I don't know when these photos are from. And then, look, Gavin Fish has all these security cameras too. Maybe you guys could even contact Gavin Fish and just like, I don't know, encourage him. He's not doing YouTube anymore, but he is a reporter. He said he's going to do full-time reporting. So, okay, let me show you the fundraiser. Justice for Ellen. So, they've been fighting for more than 10 years. We've asked numerous experts on multiple fields to review Ellen's case, and they all agree this was no suicide. With the help of our lawyers, we finally convinced the court to consider the case, and we're hopeful the judge will intervene for Ellen and order her death certificate to be changed. We expect the trial will be scheduled for later this year or early next. You can read more about Ellen's case here and sign our petition to the Pennsylvania attorney here. Oh, yeah. Okay, this is their Facebook page. If you don't follow it, you can follow Justice for Ellen as well. I'll make sure all these links are in the description box afterwards as well. Then the petition is here. Yes, we accept the cookies. 152,394 have signed. Let's get to 200,000. Yes, let's. So name, last name, email, and remember to click the link in your inbox as well. So that is all I have a voice box left for today. I can feel when my neck starts getting like, it's like my glands start going like, hello, lady, you've been working too much now, talking too much. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I'll make sure to link all of this for you, the petition, the Facebook page, the fundraiser, and Gavin Fish's site as well. Right? It sounds just like domestic violence. It sounds like they could have been increasing domestic violence, and she could have had strangulation also happening. That's so scary. I wonder if due to the anxiety, and let's speculate for a second, okay? Speculation warning. If there was DV going on and she was experiencing so much anxiety and she was kind of deflecting, saying, it's my job. The job's really stressful. I want to quit my job and go move back in with my parents. That's what she told her dad, right? But if there was DV going on, maybe she's like, oh my word, I can't marry this guy. I can't marry this guy. And maybe that day she thought, you know what? It's time for a conversation or something. I mean, we've seen that in many cases. That person then like, oh, hell no, you know? Thank you so much. And yes, justice and awareness for Ellen. Please do share her story far and wide. If you can go to her petition, I'll put that in the chat now. Please share that. And then I will see you in the next one.